trying to my steering wheel.
All right. Welcome to the Boston Boys Sports Podcast. I'm one half of the Boston Boys. I'm Eli Horrigan. And with me, as always, is my good friend and the other half of the Boston Boys, Steve Fernandez. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, not as good as last week. But we are 83 games away. We only picked up one game. So I always want to mention that we are partnered with Jones and for Sports. Check them out on Twitter, on Instagram. Go take a look at their YouTube page for all the latest in sports. Jones and for Sports. We make sports better. Today is Sunday, April 14th. We are a day behind here, but we have another great show for all of you guys. And beginning with our overreaction. So it's a Sunday overreaction. If you're not familiar with it, we touch on something that we think is an overreaction to something that happened in Boston sports, or I guess sports across the page last week. And it's either something that has left us elated or irritated. Steve, why don't you lead us off today?
So I'm gonna go with something that may end up being absolutely nothing, but at the moment I'm gonna overreact to it, and it's the Drew Holiday contract. In no way do I not like it. I like Drew Holiday. I like what he's brought to the team. I think he's got a little veteran thing to him.
Sure.
It's more so I'm kind of worried that it could affect Derek White's contract in the future. I know they
Oh
have him
yeah.
tied up for about 19 mil next season. He's gonna. Before this season, they were looking for an extension. I guess they couldn't come to the number, so that throws a little bit more into it for me. If they've already tried and they haven't been able to.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm sure they'll find a way to get it done. They're gonna want to get it done. I like Derek White's game in this team on this team more so than Drew Holiday. I think he's a better
Yeah.
fit.
Yes,
So for me,
absolutely.
it's that. Yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, and when you look at it, Drew Holiday is what, 34, 35 years
yeah.
old, and locking him up till he's like 38, 39. I mean, I guess I'm not an accountant, so I don't know how salary caps work. I thought a salary cap, you hit a number and you couldn't go over it. And it seems like salary caps are a suggestion now. It's like you shouldn't go over this. If you do, you just have to pay more. So I'm fine with them paying if they can get Derek White too. But if you just sign Drew Holiday and you're not going to be able to sign Derek White, I don't like the signing as much. I like what Drew brings as well. He brings a championship DNA. And like you said, he's a good veteran leader, but Derek White, I think, is a better fit for this team. So if you kept Drew Holiday at the expense of we have to walk away from Derek White, I'm with you. I don't like it. Um, so it's an overreaction in terms of we're getting the team in trouble for something they haven't done yet. If you don't sign Derek White, this is a real overreaction. So I get it.
Exactly.
My overreaction is as with last week. I went Red Sox and I told you they were legit, and I'm not gonna tell you they're not legit. My overreaction is Trevor Story is hurt again. And I wrote a blog about this. Is he the worst contract in Boston history? What I'm fuming about is that Xander Bogaerts isn't on the Red Sox anymore. Xander Bogaerts, since he went to the Padres, including this year as well, he's played in all games except for 7. He's taken
Yeah.
7 days off. Trevor Story has made $62.5 million in Boston so far, and he's played 43% of the time. And that angers me because there's a good friend of mine, Winston. He's a great friend of the show too. He always tunes in. He's on his way to San Diego soon for a vacation. I hope he can take in a Padres game. And from me, Winston, could you please ask Xander nicely to come back? I will give him a portion of my salary. I don't make a lot of money, but I'm willing to do that to bring him back because even though Bogaerts isn't having statistically a great season, I mean, we're only a couple weeks into the season, so it's not a big deal, but he's on the field. He's a homegrown product, and you let him walk to San Diego. Now, I don't know that he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But if he is, because they're letting in like the Adrian Beltres of the world anyway, so like he's going in with a Padres hat now. That just irks me. That's my overreaction is Trevor Story's hurt again, and we could have just kept Xander Bogaerts. What do
Yep.
you think about that?
No, I agree 100%. It's one of those things. I mean, it's homegrown talent. Why not take care of your homegrown talent as opposed to getting somebody from somewhere else, especially somebody from Colorado and bringing them in and paying them as opposed to just taking care of your own. It just doesn't make sense.
It's one of those things, and if you haven't read the blog, go read it. I'll say it's an excellent blog, but I wrote it, so I'm not really impartial on
It
this.
is.
But when you read it, I basically break down like the Colorado Rockies, the Coors Field effect, and I break down Troy Tulowitzki and I break down Trevor Story and how similar their numbers were in Colorado and then the first year when they leave, but also just the fact that the money he's making. And one of the things that irks me is I've heard people say like it's so tough for him because he worked so hard to get back on the field, as if every other player in Major League Baseball didn't work hard. And I'm not trying to be a bad guy, and I'm not trying to, because I hope Trevor Story recovers, and I hope he's somewhere else next year, just not in Boston. It's just that's not an excuse to continue to fail. If I don't do my job well, right, my bosses come to me and they say, do better or you're fired. And it's like, but I worked really hard. I tried. Trying doesn't get, not in a big sports market. And I'm going to use this to go right into the Red Sox because the Red Sox they had a really tough week this week. And you can sit on the throne now, but I'm going to defend the Red Sox too, because if you just look at the box scores, it doesn't look great. Okay. Corbin Burns, I picked him to win the Cy Young. They lose 7-1. He gives up a home run to Tyler O'Neill. And then over the next 22 batters, he only lets up one other hit. So, I mean, Corbin Burns, that game aside, Cutter Crawford who I don't like, goes 5 scoreless innings. He goes 5 scoreless. He leaves the game. They're up 5-0. They lose 7-5. The bullpen absolutely implodes. Okay. Which the bullpen, I'll get to that in a minute, was their strong suit the week prior. Thursday, Garrett Whitlock, starting pitcher. He goes 5 innings, 1 run, right? Game ends up 4-4, heading into extra innings. Bullpen gives up 6 in the top of the 9th. A bullpen again, right? This Isaiah Campbell, when I say the bullpen, he gave up 8 earned runs in 2 innings. Why is he on a major league roster? Tanner Houck, he finally looked human. Okay, against the Angels, he gives up 4 runs over 12 hits over 5 2/3. And then this Tampa Bay Ray baseball, they send out Cooper Criswell, which I know you're a big Criswell fan.
Huge.
He goes 4 innings. It's a relief, but not to drone on and on about the Red Sox, but 6 errors last week, 6 errors this week. Weren't we sold that this team was going to be better defensively?
I hate to pull this one out, but I mean, they are who we thought they were.
No,
I mean, the number was 78.5 for a reason. I mean, Vegas knows what they're talking about here. It's all right. So the pitching was good the first week and a half. Well, pitching is always ahead of hitting in baseball. So if you have a bad team that's bad on paper and they come out and the pitching looks good in the first week, that's not a reason to get excited. That's a reason for concern because it's all going to come back. And it has. I can't, I'm not surprised by any of this. This is what I expected. You know that.
Yeah.
I hope for the best, would expect the worst.
Yeah.
I'm using a lot of cliches right here, but I mean, that's kind of where they've put me.
Well, and you're right. Like the pitching is always ahead of the hitting. I agree. The starting pitching's still been good. Cutter Crawford's not going to stay good. I'm not naive. He's not going to go. But one thing that really concerns me and you probably picked up on this, I'm saying it. Cutter Crawford goes 5. Brian Bayo's going 5. Houck's going 5. You're starting pitcher. You can't go more than 5 anymore. Analytics with pitching. Oh, you can't go through like Nolan Ryan in his 40s is pitching complete games. Pedro Martinez is routinely going 8 innings. You know what I mean? 7, 8 innings. It's like today's pitcher with analytics goes 5 innings. We don't have a strong bullpen. And like I said, the bullpen 2 weeks ago, 3 earned runs in 24 innings, which was fantastic. And I was like, all right, Chris Martin, Kenley Jansen, you got some names in there. And now you're seeing, Isaiah Campbell. And then this week, it's 15 earned runs in 24 innings. So it's like, that's a real cause for concern. when it comes to the Red Sox. We one more tonight with LA. I will say in my predictions, I did see I believe I went optimistic and said they could get one win against Baltimore. They could have had two. They end up with none, which is really frustrating as a fan. And then I believe I picked them to sweep the Angels, which they're 1-1 right now. So my predictions last week, if you were betting based on what I said, I apologize. But I still one of the things that's wild to me is like when Trevor Story goes out, he's out for the season now. Okay, he needs shoulder surgery. Did you feel like in this? Oh boy, how do we replace him? Or in your mind, it's like, nah, he's replaceable.
I didn't feel like, I mean, I guess you could kind of say he's replaceable because he hasn't been there, so it's kind of something you're used to doing anyway. Um, but I know Red Sox ownership, and they're not gonna really try to replace him. They're gonna try to put a band-aid on it,
I
like they've
guess
done with everything else.
I guess what I'm saying is you, the fan, you, Steve Fernandez, right?
Yeah,
He's making 22.5 million this season, right?
yeah.
That should like that if you go back a couple years ago, if they say, hey, Mookie Betts is out for the season, that's a huge blow. Pedro
Oh
Martinez out for
no,
the season.
yeah,
Like you don't feel like that with Trevor Story. When Trevor Story went out, I think I wrote like, I don't know how much of a big deal is this. Like it's
yeah,
it's Trevor Story. It's you
yeah. It
bring
would have
up
been no bigger than losing a Mark Bellhorn or something like that. Is truly the feeling with that loss.
easy
And
Bellhorn.
yeah, but to be honest, I mean, if the team was actually contending or you felt it was a contender, then you might be concerned, a little more concerned. But due to his injury history and the fact that he hasn't produced even when he's not injured, then no, you don't feel that crushing blow of oh my, like one of our biggest guys went down. He's not that.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy batting close to 300 in Colorado, and I think his
Yeah.
average, off the top of my head, I could be wrong. It's in my blog, but I think it was like 227. Like that's terrible. Like that's a huge drop off. Like if you want to know if Coors Field is real, that effect, it is very much so. So I think that's all we really got to talk about with the Red Sox. I will write more. I do my Sunday night blogs, wrapping up the week and the week ahead. Unless do you have any more takes that on the Red Sox other than the fact that you love them as well, from what I'm gathering?
No, no, I love my Red Sox. However, like I said, 70.5 was the number for a reason, and I think that's pretty accurate.
All right. Well, we'll see you in 83 more wins, and then we'll both rejoice that they won 90. Unfortunately, as you saw, the 90 is not even going to give them the playoffs this year. But let's go back to not go back, I should say, let's move forward. We want to go heavy NBA today for obvious reason. The NBA season and the NHL will touch on their ending, and playoffs are starting. We did our overrated, underrated, the 5 and 5 last week. We're gonna do it again this week, and we're gonna do our NBA edition. And I love starting with underrated players. And why don't you start us off, Steve? Underrated, 5 underrated players. Let's lead us off with the first person you want.
I'm gonna go with one that will, of course, pull on Boston fans' hearts. I'm gonna go with Paul Pierce.
Oh, okay.
I
Good one.
don't think I don't think he gets enough love. A lot of it is tied with, well, of course, because he had KG and Ray Allen. There's a lot he did before that, and also just the simple fact that um, a lot of what he's saying now, comparing himself to other people, is kind of like hurting the public perception of Paul
Yeah.
Pierce. 4-time All NBA, steals leader for the Celtics, 3-pointers as well. He has 7 game winners, like last second game winners, that ranks him 5th all time behind Jordan, Kobe, LeBron, and Joe Johnson. His defensive tenacity, everything else, and I mean Celtics fans know. I just think
Yeah.
nationally, of course, he's in the Hall of Fame, so people could say, "Well, that's ridiculous," but
Yeah.
I still don't think he gets as much love as he deserves.
Sure. And people might say it's ridiculous. Some of our picks, anyway. I know a few of my picks, people would probably say ridiculous. It's not so much that we think these guys are good or bad. It's that we think that they're bigger or worse than where people rate them. For instance, there was a lot of pushback. I got a lot of pushback from people on our overrated last week on the NFL. And I'm telling people, like, listen, pump the brakes. It's not that these guys are bad. We just don't think they belong where they are. So Paul Pierce, Hall of Famer. I had the privilege of going to a lot of that title run. I had a buddy who had hookup for seats, and we were sitting up high, but I got to see a lot of those games. And I had the privilege of seeing Paul Pierce when the Celtics were really bad too, and for cheap money. He was just a phenomenal player. And to pile on to Paul Pierce, my first, and I'm gonna go with Rajon Rondo. He's one of my favorite point guards. He became kind of a mercenary later in his career. Just he'd go team to team. I think attitude hurt him, but that title run for the Celtics, when we talk about Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, and people say the big three, it's a big four. Rondo gets left out. He's in his second season that year. He averages 10, 5, and 4 in his second year. He led the team in assists. He's 17th all time in assists per game, and that's ahead of Bob Cousy, Tiny Archibald, Gary Payton. I just think he doesn't get that. He was one of those guys where he could score, he didn't have to, and he was a true floor general. And I think that that sort of point guard gets left behind because when you have Chris Paul, a guy who loves to score, and when you have Isaiah Thomas was one for the Celtics and Isaiah Thomas for the Pistons, these are point guards who are superstars. Rondo's not a superstar, but I think he's a guy who gets left out, and he was a really good pure point guard.
Yeah, we all remember primetime Rondo.
Yeah, absolutely. It was like anytime the Celtics were in prime time, the guy would go for like 20. Like he could score. He was fantastic at Kentucky.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think he gets his due on that championship team. I think he's really underrated. So
Yep,
who do
I
you
agree with that.
who do you got next?
Well, I'm going to continue with the floor general theme and go with Chauncey Billups. Go with Mr. Big Shot.
Big
I
shot.
mean,
Yeah.
Finals MVP, 3-time All NBA, 2-time All Defensive Player, Boston Celtics draft pick.
That's
Yeah,
right. He was a was he excuse me, he was a Patino pick
yeah,
too, right?
he was the Duncan year, wasn't he? Wasn't he
Yeah,
they were supposed to get number
they had
one?
two. Didn't they get they
Yeah,
had Mercer and Chauncey, right?
Ron Mercer. Ron
Yeah,
Mercer.
okay.
Uh, I remember one real quick. I went to a Celtics game. I want to say it was in '98, and Ron Mercer was on the court. And I remember we went because they were playing the Timberwolves. I was a huge KG fan. We went to watch the game, and there was a foul called. Mercer was called for a foul at half court, and he took the ball from whoever was dribbling the ball up, and he just went to like show off for the crowd and dunk it, and he absolutely front rimmed it and just
Oh,
fell to the floor in dead time. And I remember
yeah.
just laughing because I remember Grant Hill had a commercial back in the day, a spray commercial where a kid tried to dunk like him and ended up doing that. And
Yeah.
it's just what made me think of
Yeah.
it. It was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. God. All right. We'll
All right.
keep going. I won't but oh boy, yeah.
Go ahead. Go
Who
ahead. Who do you have for number? Who's your second one?
all right. Well, since you said the Tim Duncan year, I have Tim Duncan as underrated, which
Okay.
is probably people are gonna be like, how is he underrated? He's Tim Duncan. I saw a TikTok recently, and people are trying to tell me that Anthony Davis is better than Tim Duncan. And
Oh, no.
which is I'm like, do these people watch? Like, I know that young kids say, like, we're old heads when it comes to NBA. Like, we love the late 90s, early 2000s. And so maybe I overrate some guys. Don't tell me Anthony Davis, who's hurt more often than he is. I mean, he is Trevor Story of the NBA, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Tim Duncan, like if Tim Duncan, the Celtics win that lottery and get Tim Duncan, the Celtics are good for 20 years. You know what I mean? Like, don't tell me Anthony Davis. Tim is better than Duncan. I told previously, I think in a blog I wrote that Spurs basketball is boring, and I stand by that. So Tim Duncan was perfect. He was Mr. Fundamental, but he averaged 19 and 10 for his career. And considering the last 7 years of his career, he averaged under 19 points per game. It tells you how good he was in those first like 12 years, I think it was. He's a 15-time All-Star, 15-time All Defense, 15-time All NBA, 5-time NBA champ, 3-time Finals MVP, 2-time league MVP, and he didn't shoot threes. This is all mid-range and back to the basket. Don't tell me that anybody in the NBA today is even close to Tim Duncan. He's probably the best power forward all time. I would have to make a list, but he's one of them. Don't compare Anthony Davis to Tim Duncan. That's why I have him as being underrated, because I think people today don't realize how good he was.
I think it's timing, and I also think it's flashiness. People like the flash. People like which will come up in the overrated, I think, list. But yeah, 100%. I mean, he was Mr. Fundamental. He did boring stuff, but he easily, if he isn't the, it's so difficult for me because I always want to say KG, but to be honest, Tim Duncan was a better power forward.
Yeah, I
If
like
I'm being
KG way
completely honest,
better. Yeah.
right? Exactly. Um, yeah, he's
I'm just gonna
probably the
say,
greatest power forward.
I didn't want to cut you off. I'm just gonna say, like, KG to not KG, Tim Duncan to me, he's Greg Popovich's Tom Brady.
100%.
Like Greg
Absolutely.
Popovich equals Bill Belichick. He had Tim Duncan. Bill had Tom Brady. Like, we're talking about one of the greats, all-time greats in the game, which is why to me it's insane to me that I would even put him as underrated. But I have him underrated now because of today's day and age. People don't realize just how dominant Tim Duncan was.
Yep. No, I love that one. It's again, it's not underrated because people think he stinks. People know he
Yeah,
was great,
yeah.
but they're underrating how great he actually was, especially
Uh,
this time and age.
all right, let's go to your number 3 then.
So I'm going to go with Dikembe Mutombo,
Okay.
and a lot of it is defensive based, obviously.
Yeah.
6-time All Defensive Team. I think it was 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. Just, I mean, he played on some tough teams. Obviously, they didn't do much. I mean, beating a 1 seed is something to celebrate. But I
Yeah.
mean, I just, when it comes to big men and you're taking in everything, Bill Russell gets the love that he gets. Defensive, 11 championships, everything, 8 in a row, all that stuff. Mutombo, I just don't feel he gets the love that he deserves. And again, he's a Hall of Famer. So obviously he gets credit. I don't believe he gets enough credit for what he did. And I mean, remember, he played with Iverson in that year. What was it, 2000, 2001, I believe it was. They went to the finals
Yeah. Yeah.
with that horrible roster. And Mutombo was a part of that. Iverson
Yeah.
carried, but
He
Mutombo was a part of that as well.
Yeah, that one's tough for me because I know what you're saying. I see what you're saying, but I also like Dikembe Mutombo to me is like in a real Hall of Fame, he doesn't belong. The NBA is not a real Hall of Fame.
No,
Um,
it's basketball Hall of Fame. It's not even the NBA Hall of Fame. It's
yeah,
complete basketball.
and he played on really bad teams, which so that's where I see what you're saying. Like, but my final memories of Mutombo are on that 76 team where he can barely get up and down the court. Like, and
Oh
Iverson's
yeah.
basically dragging him. So it's like, I see what you're saying. And it's your list. So you put whoever you want on your list. You know what I mean? Um, Sticking with the big man theme, I'll go, Dirk Nowitzki. Uh,
Okay.
Okay, and this is again, I put him as underrated, and I think it's because he changed the game. He absolutely changed the game. Like a few years before him is Christian Laettner. Christian Laettner, if he's in the league 10 years later, is a NBA big man who can shoot. And I had a debate with a friend of mine. It's actually, he's one of my tattoo artists, believe it or not. And we played basketball together growing up. I more or less got him water because I was, I'm very short and very wide. So, I don't necessarily, I wasn't, I couldn't dunk, maybe not even on an 8-foot rim at this point, but, uh, I said that I might have Dirk on my all-time team. If I had 10 spots, Dirk might make it. And he laughed and laughed at me. And I was like, I don't know. To me, he was a game changer. Like I said, Leitner gets drafted in 92 and the game wasn't ready for a big man who could shoot. And then Dirk comes and in his second year, he's the most improved player in the league. Okay. He averages 17 points per game and 6.5 boards. He ends his career with 20 points per game, 7.5 boards. He takes that big three Heat team down to win his only title. Um, and it's one of the most impressive championships in NBA history. He averaged 26 and 10. It was 9.7, but 26 and 10 in that finals run. The only other time he made it to the finals was the Heat with Shaq and D Wade, which they couldn't overcome that one because it's Shaq. But I just think what he did for European players coming to the league and what he did in the NBA too. I really think like there's guys like Steph Curry who changed the game. Like that's what I think Dirk did for the game.
Yeah, I think it's I love Dirk Nowitzki. To not like him would be ridiculous.
Yeah,
Um, Great player. I mean, would he be on my all time team? Probably not. I mean, starting five, no, obviously.
definitely not
Um,
starting five.
but yeah, he could find his way in there. I mean, again, as power forwards go, his name's in there. It has to be. You don't have a choice.
Well, and that like being said, like do I think he's better than Kevin? Like he I'm saying he might make it. You know what I mean? If I'm
Yeah,
drafting
yeah,
against other like he's gonna make it on some level on somebody's team, but he played defense, he could rebound. He wasn't like we had the I mean, what Rafe LaFrentz, remember we got him? He was supposed to be
hmm
like baby Dirk, like guy couldn't defend, he wasn't a good rebounder and he couldn't shoot. It's like, okay, so
yep,
that's terrible. Dirk did all the things like a big man could do, except he could shoot as well. And that's
yep.
all the reason I have him there.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like
All
it.
right, who's number 4 for you?
I'm gonna go with Grant Hill.
Okay.
Comes in his rookie season, averages 26 and 5, wins rookie of the year. His third year, he finishes third in MVP voting, 5-time All NBA. And for him, it's mostly due to injury. It's
Yeah,
a lot of people didn't get to enjoy what he was for a long period of time.
sure.
And later on, it's the same thing. He kind of dragged himself through through late seasons, 100 different teams, all that other stuff. But when he came into the league, I think it was what he and Jason Kidd came in.
Yeah.
He was just, I'm not going to say he was more of like a Scottie Pippen type, if you will,
Yeah.
maybe a little more athletic if I had to give him something.
I mean,
And
yeah.
just a stud, an absolute stud in college,
Yeah.
absolute stud. And it's just due to injuries. But if people who got to see him play for that period, that 5 year window where he was what he was, unbelievable ball player.
He was so good in Detroit. And then when he went to Orlando, I think that's when he started having his knee
Yeah.
injuries, right? That was
Yeah.
derailed his career. I also want to mention those Pistons jerseys were clean. The teal with
Yep.
the horse and the yeah, oh my God, those things were real nice. Um, I thought I'm the Jersey King, man. I got my Expos Vlad Guerrero jersey right now. I'm feeling good. No, I completely agree. He's one of those guys where if he did, man, you want to do a list of people who you wish never got injured. He's probably number one on the list, right? Like you
Yeah.
say,
He and
Scottie
Derrick
Pippen,
Rose.
Derrick Rose, yeah, even Tracy McGrady, but
Yeah.
you said his comp was Pippen. He's better than Pippen, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Pippen had a better career, but he was like Grant Hill was, if he's not getting injured, he's up there as one of an all-time greats.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a quick one because there's not much to this guy. I just think he was underrated. He was only a two-time All-Star. Glenn Robinson.
Big dog.
He averaged 20 points per game for his career, 6
Yeah.
rebounds per game for a career. He spent it's like he's not Giannis, so I don't want to say he's Giannis, meaning he's in Milwaukee. He just doesn't have the titles. He was so good. For anybody who watched 90s NBA, Ray Allen was there at one point, Vin Baker was there at one point. Vin Baker was fantastic until he found the sauce. I one of Greg Speakman I talked about last time. He had a Vin Baker poster growing up, and it was Vin Baker next to the Space Needle when he went out to
Yeah.
Seattle. That's a great poster. But no, I just
Yeah.
think Glenn Robinson's a guy who gets left out. And I mean, we're talking about a guy who averaged 20 points per game for his career in Milwaukee, and he's only an All-Star twice. So I just think he's a guy who gets left behind.
Yeah. I liked that when I was a fan. Always was. I liked how he played.
Yeah,
And he like
the high
20 points in the
socks.
NBA is nothing to 20 points in the NBA averaging is nothing to laugh at.
So we're gonna go on to number 5 for both of us, and we've had extensive talks about number 5. So I have a feeling we have the same guy.
I'm afraid.
So for underrated, I would think only because we've talked about this for hours on end. Who's your number 5?
Shaq.
I got Shaquille O'Neal. I knew I saved him for last because of this. I'm like, he's definitely gonna have Shaq too. So I figured I'd hit him last. And I'm sure anyone watching this is probably, what you say treat to a dog. Like you
Yeah.
know, Shaq, but I'll let you take the lead. I'll clean it up if you don't nail everything.
It's simple. I mean, I to go over some of the accolades. I mean, it's 15 times he was an All Star, 4 titles, 2 time scoring champ, 14-time All NBA, 3 time All Defensive Team, MVP, 3 times Finals MVP. For me, he's the most dominant player of all time.
Yeah.
And simply put, for me, he's underrated because he's never mentioned in the GOAT conversation. I get it's Jordan, and people want to argue LeBron, which I believe Kobe's
I
ahead of LeBron, but we
I
won't go
agree.
too far into that. But then, of course, when people have to throw in Kareem because of what he did, and then people will mention Will Chamberlain, well, you need to continue and you need to mention Shaq.
Yeah.
What he did when he came in, what he did to opposing teams, Hack a Shaq had to be created. They had to change the rules for this guy. He has to be at least mentioned. Do I believe he's the greatest of all time? No, I don't. It's Michael Jordan. But he needs to at least, if those other guys are going to be mentioned, he needs to be mentioned as well.
I couldn't agree more with everything you said, obviously, because we've talked about this. Young Shaq ran the floor like a gazelle. When he was in Orlando, he was um just as like LeBron. You know what I mean? He run the floor. He could dribble and run and move. He was just so big and strong and powerful coming out of LSU. When he got to LA and he filled out, there is not a center on the planet who could guard him. He was so I remember watching those Kings and Lakers series, and Vlade Divac was a good center in the NBA. He was a boy against a man when it came to Shaq. And I have Shaq there because I always think if I'm doing a fantasy draft, I know fantasy is not real life, but all-time NBA players. If you go Mike 1, I can take Kobe, I can take Dwayne Wade, I can take Allen Iverson. There's guys that are dogs at the number 2 spot who can go against Mike, but nobody can guard Shaq. And you can tell me Bill Russell could because he could guard Wilt and no one could guard Wilt. Bill Russell, I love Bill Russell. He did so much for the game. He's a Boston Celtic. He's everything NBA. He also played in the league when there was like 8 teams. Shaquille O'Neal is a different breed of human. He was tall, he was wide, he was strong. Like you said, they created Hack-a-Shaq. This is just a guy, he's above the NBA. There isn't anybody. I would make that argument. I'm sure anyone, the people who are older than us would say, oh, you didn't get to see Bill play. You didn't really see Kareem or Will. I don't need to. I saw Shaq, and he's too dominant. I remember
Yeah.
being a kid and hating Shaq and being like, everything he does is an offensive foul, which it probably could have been when he turned and his elbows out wide and he hits, and guys go down. But if you do that, you got to call it every single time on everyone. And Shaq was too good. He was too dominant. There's nobody on the planet. So when you go for a draft and you take Shaq 1, I believe you've picked a team right now there. Okay, well, now we don't have anyone to oppose them down low.
Yep.
And that's why I pick Shaq.
Yep. I agree.
So why don't we jump into overrated players? Because again, we always talk about how overrated will probably hit a nerve for people. And I love that part of it because when we did the overrated for football, I heard from a lot of people. I'm sure you did too. You know, when Emmett Smith were ruining people's childhood and
Yeah.
John Elway. I heard a lot about John Elway after. So why don't we jump into our overrated players? All right, Steve, who is your first overrated player?
So I'm going to give a quick, easy one to start off. Joel Embiid. And it's all
Ooh,
based on playoff success. I mean, the guy's been, 6 playoff appearances, I think it was,
yeah.
never been out of the second round. Just, he's obviously a stud. He's dominant, 33, 34 points a game. He's a great player. But I just think he gets way too much attention considering the playoff failures.
Yeah, I guess that's a great comp. Like, when you said it initially, I'm like, I don't know about, but I get it's my take on Lamar Jackson. If you don't win in the playoffs, so yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, I'll pile on to that too, unless you have more. I don't want to cut you off.
No,
No,
that's it.
so one of his former teammates, James Harden. James Harden scores, and I think he's like 7.5 or 8.5 assists per game for his career. He does not play defense. He's lazy. When he doesn't want to play for a team, he turns into Oakland Raider Randy Moss. Like, I'm just not going to work out or do anything. I can't stand a player like that. So I have him as overrated because of his off court and the way he doesn't play defense. Like, I'm sorry, you can't be one of the greats and just dismiss an entire part of the game. So that's why I would have James Harden as overrated.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'll go right into my second one here. We
All right.
got Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh, I felt too much attention for being part of a big three when I don't believe he's a big anything in that sense. I used to laugh at him when he was in Toronto. He had to make YouTube videos to try to get all-star votes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Those corny videos he made back in the day. I mean, he was 19-8. He had one season over, I think, what was it? Over 20. Was never in MVP voting, never top 5. Just his name is attached to the D Wade and the LeBron, and I think that's why I always just felt he was a little too much for the guy and how he played.
I completely agree, because one of my memories of Chris Bosh too would be the fact that he was billed as the next like big, like good big man. And I remember when KG came here initially, and the first time the Celtics and Raptors were going to play, and it was like, this is the old guy, Kevin Garnett. Does he still have it? And the new young upstart power forward, like Chris Bosh versus Kevin Garnett, and Garnett worked him. And it was just like, this is the future of the Raptors, and this is a big man. Like, so I completely agree. And when he went to, like, he was a big name, but it was LeBron and D Wade on that team. It wasn't, and then Dirk took them apart anyway, so it really doesn't matter. I'll go big man as well. I'll go Yao Ming, and I don't have to get, we talked about Shaq. Yao Ming's one of the, his victims. He only played in the league. This is the NBA Hall of Fame. I mean, the Basketball Hall of Fame is a joke to me. Yao Ming's time overseas counts. He only played 8 years in the NBA. He only played more than 60 games at 4 different times. He was always foot injuries. And he was completely, when he was healthy, just completely dominated by Shaq. Year in and year out, you're like, this is the year for Yao and Tracy McGrady. And then Yao would either get hurt or he would get beat up by Shaq. So Hall of Famer, no, has no business in the Hall of Fame. So,
yeah, no, I can't argue with that one. I'll jump in. My third one is probably going to break your heart, because it broke my heart to actually to write.
I already don't like it.
Sean Kemp.
Oh, Rain Man, come on.
Yeah,
Uh,
he ended his career 14-8. Well, he had one season over 20 points per game, 10 times in the playoffs, 6 one and dones. And it's funny because my next two are kind of similar to him, but it's the flash. It's where we said Tim Duncan didn't get the love he should get because he wasn't flashy. He was boring. These guys got too much attention because they were flashy and not boring. But when you break it down and look at team success and their individual success, not as good as we once thought when we were kids watching these guys play.
So borderline friendship ruiner.
Yeah.
No, I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree, but I had a Sonics Kemp jersey. I had a Cavs Kemp jersey. It's the only Cavs jersey. Actually, I think I had a Mark Price too, believe it or not. But Kemp, I loved the Sonics. I loved Nate McMillan. I loved Gary Payton. I loved Detlef Schrempf. I loved Sam Perkins. Like,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I got to ask you a quick question that plays into this.
okay.
Why as kids did we have such obsessions with Seattle-based teams? Because it was Griffey and Biuna and Edgar Martinez and Randy Johnson. And then on the flip side with basketball, I was the same way. Kemp, Payton, like, I love those teams.
So I can tell you a quick backstory, and we'll jump right back into this. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, whenever my parents signed me up for T-ball initially, and you're in it's before they started getting like teams that were named after a business. You had a big league jersey, and I was the Mariners. So 5-year-old kid, like, I'm wearing a Mariners jersey. I love the Mariners. So I got lucky. Like, Ken Griffey Jr. is the greatest baseball player I ever saw play. You can argue anybody else you want. There's nobody with a better swing. There was no one better defensively. So those teams, I mean, they were stacked. I wish they won a title. And even further past it, like David Segui was on those teams at one point. Joey Cora, I think was their second baseman. I think they had a catcher named Dave Hansen, which is my little brother's name as well. So it's
That's
like,
right.
they were just so good. And then fast forward, so I like the Mariners, like, okay, so now I like Seattle-based teams. I like the Seahawks back then. I liked Hasselbeck. I like Sean Alexander. I mean, that was closer to the end of the 90s. I loved Kemp. I loved Gary Payton. I hated the Bulls growing up
Yeah.
because they were so good. So, you see Seattle play the Bulls in the finals and, you just, that for me is why I like them.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's just funny that we kind of gravitated towards a specific city.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
in multiple sports.
so I'll pile on with the overrated then because you went with a super freak athletic Sean Kemp. I had Vince Carter, and Vince Carter, that was a heartbreaker for me too, because I really loved Vince Carter. He was so good. He was a great dunker. And that's what he was. I mean, we remember in the Olympics when he jumps over the 7-footer, that his performance in the dunk contest is the greatest all-time performance. Every dunk he did, your jaws on the floor. Like, he was a super freak athlete. However, he was only over 20 plus points per game, less than 50% of the seasons he played. And I just don't think he was a dog. Like, he played in a league against like a guy like Allen Iverson, who he had far more tools than Allen Iverson did from a physically gifted standpoint, height, jumping ability, you name it. And Allen Iverson is 10 times the player Vince Carter was. Vince Carter just wasn't a dog. He didn't have that in him. So I don't know if he just didn't have that or if he was lazy, but super freak athlete. Not, I think we look at him as like he better than he was.
Yeah, I can see that. And again, a lot of this seems to be based on playoff struggles or inability to get a team over the hump or and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I'll go right into a guy who had 10 playoff appearances in 7 one and dones. And it's funny because he is sort of in the same build of these two guys that the last two guys we've used, but Dominique Wilkins.
Hmm.
And unfortunately for him, I think a lot of it is based on the time that he played. He ran into Celtics teams, he ran into Detroit, he ran into Chicago later on, and then he just decided to play in places like Boston and look horrendous.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and
Gone at
again,
that point.
it's the flashiness. He's top 5 dunker of all time. He is absolutely a top 5 dunker of all time, and just it's so much fun to watch. But when it comes down to basketball success, winning, being able to lead a team, I think Dominique was overrated.
I definitely agree with you there because I do, like, as a kid, I'm born in '85, so I didn't see his prime, but I did get to see him like bad, older and bad. But yeah, you see highlights of him, and he's a great dunker. But part of that too is, sorry, Atlanta fans, Atlanta's the worst sports city, and it's like, anything Hawks you could sell me on anyway. So, and that brings me to my next guy as well, because another bad sports at Phoenix and Devin Booker. And it's not that Devin Booker's not good because he's a really good shooter. The close comp we always see, and we've talked about this before, is Jason Tatum. You're not in Jason Tatum's league. Tatum's far better than Devin Booker. It's laughable when people put them next to each other, like, oh, who's better? And I think I have a bias against Phoenix. They've never won a title. They're a loser franchise. They're, Barkley, Amare Stoudemire, Devin Booker, now Durant's there, Chris Paul's, like all the great losers in NBA history end up there. So Devin Booker for me made it. And it's probably Phoenix bias and because I love Tatum.
Yeah, I bet, like I think it has probably a lot to do with us as Boston fans having to listen to that comparison and despising that comparison because we all know Jason Tatum is a better player than Devin Booker. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And so
so
oh, go ahead. I was going to say, I have a pretty controversial one for 5. I don't know if you'll have them, but
all right, let's save yours then because it's literally the same guy I've already used the last two. And
okay.
again, it's the flashiness of it all. This guy's defined by jumping over a car in a dunk contest. He's
Okay.
defined
So
by
we do. Okay.
dunks. It's Blake Griffin. I mean,
Okay.
19-8 over his career, but injuries obviously played a huge part of it. Playoff failures, those Clippers teams, and dunk, everything was based on dunks with
Yeah.
this guy. And believe me, he's had a decent career, but
Yeah.
that flashiness has put him at a level of attention that he probably shouldn't have gotten at the time.
I completely agree. And he came up like, did he? No, he was just the Clippers just stink. They're a loser
Yeah.
franchise too. So, but I feel like I know it wasn't him. It was the other kid. He played for the Celtics too that married a Kardashian, but he like loosely looked like him. It's like that
Oh,
era.
Chris Humphries. Yeah.
Chris
Yeah.
Humphries, yes, thank you. But it's like, yeah, I always got like Chris Humphries, like I don't know. There's some Clippers I can't stand. Like I don't like the Lakers because the Lakers Celtics. I respect the Lakers, but like the Clippers are just like, just get out of LA, go somewhere else.
I agree.
So my last one is the one I wanted to spend the most time on, and I won't spend too much time droning on Scottie Pippen. And
That's a big one.
I know that Scottie Pippen, it's not Scotty's fault why he's made my overrated list because Scottie Pippen is a fantastic basketball player. He's a Hall of Famer. He's an NBA champion. He's on my list because of the LeBron fans. And LeBron fans drive me crazy because they'll sit there and they'll say straight face, Michael never won without Scottie. As if LeBron won without Dwayne Wade, Anthony Davis, Chris Bosh, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love. Like it's not
Ray
like,
Allen.
yeah, Ray Allen. This isn't the NCAA tournament where Carmelo Anthony can bring a bunch of guys from Syracuse to a title. It's the NBA. The only team I can think of without a true star is the Detroit Pistons in the early 2000s. And
Yeah.
Chauncey was a star, but it was like Rip Hamilton, Chauncey, those guys. I don't want to get too much into that. Scottie Pippen was a 16 points and 6 rebound guy his whole career. Don't tell me that guy he made Michael Jordan. Michael made Scottie. The year before Michael Jordan, but the year before Scottie Pippen got into the league, Michael Jordan averaged 37 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals.
Yeah.
Don't tell me Scottie Pippen made that. There's 2 guys in NBA history who have averaged 30 points per game for their whole career. Wilt Chamberlain and Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is out of this world. Not only was he physically gifted, he won all the time. I hate that LeBron fans are wrong. He's not better than Michael. I've said this before. It's the same comp with Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady. LeBron's the better athlete. Michael's the better basketball player. Stop with the narrative that Michael couldn't win without Scottie. He didn't win without Scottie, but he also played in a couple years in the 80s against the Celtics, Pistons, and Lakers. It was his time in the 90s. When he left, Scottie Pippen wasn't winning rings left and right when Mike leaves for a couple years for that hiatus. You know what I mean? He's a fantastic player. He's become overrated because of LeBron fans. They put him on a pedestal and it goes up my ass sideways.
Yeah, I like that one. I mean, I don't find it controversial because I agree with it. So I mean, that's pretty basic. But yeah, I mean, I can see how LeBron fans trying to use Scottie as an excuse
Yeah.
could absolutely emphasize your feelings on that one. Absolutely.
Especially because you and I, we're 90s fans anyway. We're early 2000s, 90s. Like I love that era of the NBA. But Michael Jordan, as much as I hated the Bulls and hated him, now as a grown man, I respect exactly what his game was because he was the great. I got to watch it. I got to witness it. And I got to witness LeBron too. And LeBron's great. He's not Mike. He's like you said, he's not Kobe. Like Kobe to me is a better basketball player than LeBron James. LeBron James is a freak athlete. Well, that does it for our overrated, underrated segment. Let us comment. Let us know how you feel about that. And right now, since we just went for our 5-5 NBA, why don't we jump into the Celtics because they're heading into the playoffs, and this is a fun time. We're coming down to it today. There's so many different scenarios in which the Celtics have no clue who they're playing at this point. I mean, you can put the play into the side. They could wind up playing Atlanta. They could wind up playing Chicago, Orlando, Indiana, Miami, or Philadelphia. And I know, Steve, you are very worried right now. So I'm going to let you start us off. NBA talk, Celtics talk, playoff talk. Why are you worried about this team?
Because of how they're playing down the stretch. And believe me, I've had arguments on Twitter. I get it that they have nothing to play for. I understand that. I understand that seeding is already set. I understand that they don't want to get injured. I understand all of the excuses as to why they are playing this way and why it should be okay for them to play this way. I hear them, but they don't make me feel better
Okay.
because this isn't a team that's won a title. The 15, 16, 16, 17 Golden State Warriors could coast into the playoffs and know that they could turn it on and do it when they had to do it. This Celtics team has never shown me that they can relax and just coast into the playoffs and then turn it on and win. There's no example of that ever happening with this team.
No.
And to hear Jason Tatum after the loss the other night, the Knicks loss, almost like brushing it aside and almost like he smells his own stuff already. We're 15 games ahead of the second seed, so we're not really concerned with this game. And then something along the lines of, we had a really good regular season, so this game doesn't really mean that much. But he averages, I believe, 33 minutes a game, and that night he played 31, and they were still being blown out by 30, and Joe Mazzulla decided to pull the starters in the fourth, and that's when they made their run. There's no DNA, there's no championship pedigree with this team other than Drew Holiday, but whatever.
Yeah.
To tell us that it's okay for them to relax going into the playoffs. This complacency could come back to hurt them, and that's what concerns me.
I understand your concern. I don't share it. I'm on the opposite side of things. And it's like the exact opposite how I take the NFL. Like I always looked at like the Colts who would take time off. We're crossing sports, but the Colts would take time off and then they would get blown out. So they beat Charlotte with no starters. They beat the Blazers. They lost to Milwaukee. They lost to New York. I'm not worried because when I look at the Knicks is a team who had to win. I know that they don't have the championship DNA to carry them. But I just think regular season wise, the Knicks are more hungry right now. I think the Celtics are going to be fine. What is starting to kind of worry me is the breakdown of rosters who they're playing. I think the Celtics far and away have the best starting five. It is I as good as Peyton Pritchard's been. He's fantastic. Al Horford's old. Sam Hauser has been good, but I don't know that I feel great even against a team like Orlando, who I like Jalen Suggs, I like Franz Wagner, and I like Paolo Banchero. And they got Wendell Carter Jr. On their bench. They have Markelle Fultz, they have Cole Anthony, they have Joe Ingles, they have Jonathan Isaac, and they have Moritz Wagner, Franz's brother, Michigan guy, by the way, fantastic at Michigan. It feels like to me that's a deep bench. You look at other benches, and it's like I see Obi Toppin's in Indiana, I see Buddy Hields in Philadelphia. There's guys like Buddy Hield could start on a number of NBA teams. He wants to win a title. That's what's starting to worry me. I am not worried. I think they're going to be ready for the playoffs. I think it's a terrible year to be the number one seed because in the play-in tournament, if let's say that these games tonight go uniformed and everything stays the same, you're going to be playing Miami in the first round or Philly. Is it Philly or Miami?
I think
it's Miami.
There's potential for either, but Miami would be right now, yeah.
So if it ended the way it's today, Philly ends up playing Chicago in the play-in. No, Philly plays Atlanta, and then Miami gets Chicago. Unless Chicago or Atlanta holds pulls a miracle win against these teams, which I don't think they will. Like, it's the worst year to be a number 1 seed. If you end up getting Miami, like, Miami's not an 8 seed. They're not.
The one thing I'll say is this: they're not an 8 seed. You're 100% correct, and there is a team that can coast into the playoffs and actually show up. They've shown that they have the ability to do that, whereas the Celtics haven't. But what I will say is this: last year was a pretty bad year to be the number 1 seed as well, because the 8 seed was Miami and they
Yeah.
took out Milwaukee. So
Yeah.
last year was equally as bad.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I'm not going to say you could see that happen, but
and now
you could
these
see that.
middle teams, like I said, it's all going to depend on tonight. Tonight's a huge night in the NBA. If you're an NBA fan, today is as good as Christmas morning for you. Every game is meaningful tonight, really, when it comes down to seeding. I think Atlanta, Chicago, and Boston in the East are the only seeds that. Oh no, sorry, as I was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, Cleveland, Milwaukee, New York, Boston, like the middle seeds. I hate to go on a brain fart right there. I think 6, 7, and 8, 5, 6, 7, 8. Orlando, Indy, Miami, and Philly are all not set. So, and I think 2, 3, and 4, like, they can jump depending. Milwaukee, we don't know with the Giannis injury. He hasn't come back yet, correct? This is an
Correct.
Achilles strain. I don't know truly how hurt he is, but like, those middle seeds are so interchangeable. But being the number 1 seed, like, as it stands right now, it's Boston, Miami, and then Philly, Milwaukee. Like, the first round of the playoffs could be absolutely bananas. I mean, you're gonna see teams like Orlando and Indy by proxy, like, they're gonna make it into the second round, and they might have home court in the second round because they could be playing Philly or Miami. And Philly is
Yeah.
notorious for losing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. It's going to be a fun playoff run.
It really is. I mean, there's the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs are like a whole different season. The NHL, I think, more so, but like, truly, when I know you have a lot to talk about with Philly, because I'll let you go on a run. I don't want to ramble.
No. I think in our last episode, we brought up teams that we might be concerned about, and Philly was kind of left off the table. And
Yeah.
I just think they deserved a little bit of credit. And it completely goes against my conversation about Joel Embiid being
Yeah.
overrated. However, he's obviously still a force. He's obviously still a problem. Could he steal a series? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of players in the past. LeBron couldn't get over the hump, and then he got over the hump. So players still have the ability to get over that hump. And I just hope that Philly and Joel Embiid don't find that opportunity against the Celtics this year. But they could be a problem if they've figured out their playoff problems, I guess.
Well, I mean, the like you said, he's overrated because he hasn't won. He's also got plenty of chances to win. It's like the old saying. It was, someone said, "Isn't Joel Embiid like done?" Only until he's alive again. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of winning, because if everyone is a loser until they win, Giannis was a loser until he gets a title. Like, that's how we kind of, as a fan, look at it. You know what I mean? Like, the Patriots are the perfect example. They're losers right now. They won for 20 years. They stopped guys from winning. So it's like Peyton Manning had this mantra of being a loser, because he couldn't get over the hump. So yeah, you're a loser now. He's still a young player in the NBA. He's still got many years ahead of him. I mean, being a 7-footer, you never know with injuries, but he's a loser until he wins. That maybe this is a year he wins. They're good. Philly, when you're looking at them, they have Tyrese Maxey, they have DeAnthony Melton, they have Kelly Oubre Jr., they got Tobias Harris, they got Joel Embiid, they got Cameron Payne. So, I mean, I just think they have a good roster, and they're, for a 7th seed, I mean, they could absolutely overtake Milwaukee.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think they do have the ability. I mean, that roster is solid. They have really good players that can cause a problem and can steal a game, and that's all it takes in the playoffs. You steal one here, you steal one there, and especially if you can take home court, that's a problem.
And one other team I really like. So like I said, I want to say I'm not worried. I think just because they haven't been able to coast in the past. I just think right now is the time to coast. I love the Celtics starting five, but I'm seeing a complete dog in Jalen Brunson. And I told you 2 episodes ago, I loved Jalen Brunson, but I didn't think they could make a run without Julius Randle. I actually think they can with Jalen Brunson. Like he is, I mean, he is really coming to his own. That team is very good.
Yeah, they're scary. I mean, what is he? 36 a game since Randall was when they actually announced he was going to be done. I think Brunson's averaged 36, and I'm including a 60 that
Yeah.
he put up. I mean, he's a dog. Like he is out there carrying that team the best he can, and he is doing it.
So I'll leave it with this because I do want to touch on the Bruins. I'm not worried. I don't share your fear with the Celtics. I will say this though, this is a massive postseason for Jason Tatum.
Yes,
He has to take the
100%.
jump, and so does Jaylen Brown. Like they both have to be really good because they're your stars. You need White, you need Holiday, you need Porzingis, and you even need Pritchett. But this is the playoff season now. This is where Jason Tatum becomes a man.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, in my opinion, and this could be something for later. If there is an absolute failure in the playoffs this year, and that includes first round exit or second round exit, you have to seriously take a look at your roster and you have to look at your coach.
Yes, I completely agree. And another coach who's on the hot seat for me is Jim Montgomery. And the Bruins right now, we're going to touch on them because they have 2 games left in the regular season. As it stands right now, I think their first round matchup would be Tampa Bay, and that frightens me. I don't think they're better than Tampa Bay. The only thing I see, so Tampa, they have a championship DNA. They're fifth in goals for, they're fourth in assists, they're fifth in points, they're first in power play percentage, they're first in shot percentage, they're fifth in penalty kill percentage. The Bruins, who routinely get outshot, I put that in my blog, my Sunday blog. It worries me. Their only upper hand in Tampa is that Tampa is in the bottom half of the league in goals against, and they have the 6th worst save percentage. But if you're getting outshot every night by a team that scores at a really high rate, it's not good. And they have Nikita Kucherov, and Kucherov to me he's got 141 points and he leads the NHL. He's got 43 goals. He's got 98 assists. He might be the best player in hockey, not named Connor McDavid.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
agree 100%.
and don't forget, they still have Steven Stamkos. They have Victor Hedman. They have Braden Point. Like, this is a good team. If you're the Bruins and this is your first round, like you got Florida last year, and Florida is out of this world. They're the team I think will win the Stanley Cup. Like, I think they're that good that they could do it. Like, Tampa to me is this year's Florida Panthers. Like, I don't want to see the Lightning.
Nope, neither do I. And that is 100% a reason to be very concerned. And it goes back to a conversation we had before. I mean, who's going to do it for the Bruins? Who's going to be able to add on to Pasternak? And then again, I mean, I say it every single time we bring up the Bruins. The goalie situation in Jim Montgomery scares the ever living you know what out of me. I don't know
Yeah.
what he's going to do, especially when you go in and gets a team with such great offensive power.
Yeah.
Okay, so Swayman allows 4 goals in game 1. Well, okay, well, we're going to switch it out. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Or if he gets hot, well, we got to give Olmark some time. I really do not feel confident going into this, especially with Montgomery making those calls.
I'm with you 100%. What they lost to Carolina earlier this week. They beat Pittsburgh last night. I almost think you would have been better served losing to Pittsburgh, who sits in the second wild card spot, because I don't think Pittsburgh's that good. Sidney Crosby has 89 points, which is 15th in the league. And then they have like 8 other players who are just over 30 points. Like they're not a strong offensive team. And their goalie situation is very middle of the road. That's who you want to see. You don't want Tampa. I don't love this Bruins roster. I wrote to you before that they're the real lovable losers in Boston. They make the playoffs almost every year. They win fewer than, I think it was 6% of the time they win a title. They're not gonna win this year. David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand, you know those two guys, but past that, like Zaka's a question mark, Coyle's a question mark, like Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm was. I mean, these guys aren't guys who I think can carry you to a title. And again, the splitting up the goalie, like I guess I'm on board with it now because it's what's going to happen. Like he's not riding one goalie, and I have to get on board with it as a fan. I'm not happy about it. I like you can't. I just can't see a scenario in which, let's say they put Linus Allmark in for game one, and they win 2-0, 2-1. It doesn't matter. Game two, they put in Swayman, and they go out there and they lose 5-2. And then Allmark comes in game three and they win another one, 3-2. You're really gonna put Swayman back out there because it's his turn when the other guy's your hot goalie, and Swayman gave up 5 in his first appearance. You're gonna go away from the guy who he's winning. This isn't the regular season where they're going back to back. You have a break. These guys have a chance to get their legs. I feel really, I feel so much more uneasy about the Bruins than I do the Celtics.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think last year brings that on as well. I mean, what happened last year has got to stick in the back of our heads a little bit and affect how we feel about it. So, yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, I'm ready to wrap things up here, although I do want 2 predictions out of you. And my 2 predictions are, where do the Celtics finish and where do the Bruins finish? Because we have the playoffs are right here. Where are the Celtics going to finish? Where are the Bruins going to finish? First round, second round, third round, championship. What do we got for them?
I'm going to say Bruins get out of the first round. They get knocked out in the second round.
Okay.
That's my guess. I'm going to guess in 6. Celtics, I got to say, I think they get knocked out on the Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, everybody, I couldn't disagree more. I don't have either of those. I think the Bruins are done in the first round. I think if they get Tampa, they're not going to beat Tampa. Tampa, I think, is better, and they have a championship DNA. I see a championship in the Celtics' future, man. I can't say that they won't. They've been so good this year. They're gonna. I know that you're worried about them. Don't be, Steve. Please, just trust in me. I was wrong about Nikhil. I won't be wrong about the Celtics.
Wrong
Yes.
about the Red Sox, but have blind faith.
I'm not wrong about the Red Sox. Not yet. They are still on pace. They set 83 more, so that's it for the show today. Steve, I love doing this. I love having fun and talking sports with you. We are partnered with Jones and for Sports. Jones and for Sports. We make sports better. Steve, give me a final thought before I let you go.
I'm just going to say, even though I sound like I don't believe in the Celtics, I am rooting for the Celtics. So let's go C's.
All right. And the playoffs are right among us. We're going to be back again next week, and we're going to do it all over again. My final thought is, fear not, my good fans out there. Celtics are going to win a title. Bruins got a lot of work to do. The March for 90 continues. We're 83 games away. Steve, happy Sunday. Have a great day.
You too, bud.
All right. Bye.